and are just some of the words that you may hear in today's podcast. Enjoy!
Hello and welcome to the Perfect Information Podcast, a board game podcast that is robust, stimulating, and full of enriching tenets with me, Yorgos Panagiotidis, and the bliss that comes with an intrinsic lack of complexity.
Ben Maddox. Hello there, Georgios.
Bonjour Benjamin, ça va?
I'm pretty ça va, thank you. Et toi?
Ah, c'est pas mal.
Welcome to the Perfect Information Podcast en français with me, Benjamin, and across the table,
Yorgos Panagiotidis.
You see, it's really interesting because your name doesn't change in the languages, does it?
No.
So I changed mine to Benjamin.
Ah, je ne sais pas.
And you're Georgios Panagiotidis.
Non, je m'appelle Yorgos Panagiotidis.
Across all the lands, Georgios.
Ah ouais, c'est vrai.
Do you get recognised on the street a lot? What with now you being a celeb?
Yes, I get recognized a lot by my face.
Well,
what with this being an audio medium.
That's true. I mean,
I felt it important to point out this very, very highly sophisticated joke.
I mean, I don't want to, recycle an old joke from the 50s, Georgios, but you've got a perfect face for radio.
Yes, because it's recognizable.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Anyway, Georgios, what are we talking about today?
I have no idea.
So I want to talk about something today, Georgios, that's fairly nebulous.
Ah, I see. Is it mist?
I mean, the red mist, maybe.
Is that a reference to some superhero comics I shouldn't have read?
No.
Right.
It's the red mist, Georgios, is an English term. When the red mist ascends, you are consumed by the all-consuming fires of rage and anger, and you desire to destroy all in your path. I'm talking about
masturbation.
And aggression in gaming.
All right, fair enough.
So, yeah.
You can see how I could sort of mix them up, right?
Because I've been listening to a few podcasts and they've talked about the concept of, and I'll name check them. I was listening to the State of Games and they talked about meanness in games.
Meanity.
And then I think about me and sometimes, George, I react to certain things, especially a sense of injustice. And I'm not a shrinking wallflower.
Right.
I'm something of a blooming rose. And so, personality-wise, of course.
Yes.
And so often I express myself in what might be considered an aggressive manner.
Really?
People confuse my enthusiasm, Georgios, for aggression, and quite frankly, I just don't understand why!
I don't think anybody does, to be honest.
So the first thing I want to talk about is, because this is, nebulous. It exists within games. Aggression, some games are designed specifically to promote aggression. Mm-hmm. And I don't mean sort of out-of-table aggression, sort of punching someone in the face, but the very actions that you do on the board are aggressive. And some games promote a sense of bickering and aggression above the table.
I think that's very interesting, because I think already we need to sort of split up certain areas, certain concepts and ideas that all fall under the umbrella of aggression. And in the most technical sense imaginable, aggression basically involves any action that would benefit me and directly harm you. And in basically 98%, I'm going to assume, of competitive games, this is true of most of the actions you take. Everything that benefits me harms you in some way, because it keeps you from winning, because it advantages me as the victor of the game. So I would like to I would suggest moving away from these purely technical definitions of aggression, like I moved a bit and now you can't have the bit, therefore this counts as aggression. But actually include, let's focus on these moments, because those are, I think, the moments most people associate with aggression in board games, where the events of the game have an evoke an emotional response that is at least leads into aggression, not necessarily being actively angry.
What do you mean by aggression here? Do you mean aggression in the actions that you do on the board, or do you mean I'm going to kill you?
I'm a little bit of both. I think they both come from the same, from a similar point, from a similar mindset and similar understanding, similar emotional position within the game, and they express themselves differently.
So you said basically any competitive game is inherently aggressive.
Yes.
So
Well, I was arguing that the purely technical definition, but I would use aggression. I mean, the interesting point is another part of aggression.
It has many different colours, but essentially a zero-sum game is aggressive.
Yes.
You would argue.
Yes.
So is this the primary response a game designer is asking us to have if they design a competitive game? Or is that an unintended consequence?
Interestingly enough, I believe that, especially with competitive games, this has become so commonplace, so habitual to game design. I mean, it's changing slightly, but it seems to me in a lot of cases it's habitual in that aggression, as in zero-sum games, competitive games, are so deeply entwined in people's understandings of what a game is, that an aggressive reaction or aggressive response to something that happens in the game is not necessarily intentional.
Okay, you're going to have to help me here because we're using the word aggression. Because when you say an aggressive response, I don't know what you mean. I don't know whether you mean an overt act of what we would assume as childishness. How dare you do that to me? I'm going to take my toys home. Or do you mean a response within the confines of the game that is, aggressive back? You do this to me, I'll do this to you. I'm not angry with you, really, above the table, but this is the contract we've signed. And if you choose to do this, I will do this too. I will repay aggression with aggression, but in game terms, not in shouty terms.
Yeah, but I think I wouldn't. I'm not sure I can actually accept this kind of distinction you're making.
Okay.
I think I would put those two options you made far closer together. I think the distinction between getting loud at a game table, sort of breaking the implicit social code of, this is all in fun, good fun, and doing something to intentionally harm somebody else's position in the game are very close together. It's just how we are, to what extent we're willing to express this aggression within the confines of this game.
But it's a magic circle thing, right? So if you look at certain games, fake outrage.
Right.
I can't believe you did that to me, you bounder. Exists within the magic circle. It's funny. I do fake outrage because I'm crap at games, and inevitably, and I've got the biggest mouth in the room often. So people pick on me. Right. When I played Terraforming Mars, these cards where you can just damage people.
Right.
Like three players in a row played them on me, and it wasn't because I was this devastating, Terraforming Mars savant that had to be destroyed, otherwise I would walk over the entire table. Right. It was because I'm a mouthy twat, and people were like, "Isn't it funny to annoy Ben because he does this fake outrage thing that exists within the magic circle?" Yet the legitimate standing up and saying, "That's outrageous, that's terrible, how dare you do that to me," shatters the circle, right?
Yes, I think those extreme points do exist. I think there's a dimension, this fake outrage. I like this term very much because I love fake outrage in a game. I really do. It's one of the most hilarious, fun, and entertaining aspects a game can have. And there used to be this guy in my gaming group who was really good at it. It was just, a kind of banter within the game. We're playing this game was aggressive. It was aggressive now in inverted commas. And then we would start with this fake outrage and we become ludicrous. Well, the fake insults we would throw at each other. Very, very subtle things like the tone of voice, the choice of words. It just became a very, something that sort of strengthened the magic circle. I don't want to use the word magic circle here, but it strengthened this group cohesion.
The dome under which, the invisible dome under which you sit when the game is being played.
Exactly. So basically we felt like, it was bringing the group closer together. It was a shared experience where we're saying things that only we understood and we saw the humor in, like not just the two of us, but the group itself. So we entertained ourselves as part of the game. It was great fun, and I love it. And then there's this actual aggression, the moment where a single player seems to step outside of what we consider, not acceptable behavior, but at least, expected behavior within the game,
because they're not accepting the inherent contract that we all sign, that within this, and it happens to me, and I talked about that ages ago. I talked about that through the Ages game where I lost my shit because I just felt like everyone was picking on me because I was crap, and it just seemed very, very unfair. And I stood up and I shattered that invisible dome that was around us because. And people's responses to that, well, you signed the contract. You sat at the table and you said, no, I accept that within this is permissible. And you shouldn't be annoyed by this because it's written into the rules of the game.
Yeah, I can just point in. I don't want this to be a big discussion point, but I so fundamentally disagree with this argument.
I understand, yeah.
I reject it wholeheartedly. I think the this implicit contract, I think, needs to be broken, needs to be ignored, needs to be forgotten the moment somebody is visibly negatively affected, not fake affected to get it like an edge, like, ooh, don't, pick on me. I'm the weakest, blah, blah, blah. I'm whining. Don't attack me. But when somebody's visibly affected, like they're really angry, they're really upset, they're really, even sad, you just go, fuck the contract.
You have to fuck the contract at that point. You have to tone down, you have to play suboptimally. Yeah. Maybe then it results in you thinking, probably not keen on playing with this person anymore. But while you're in that relationship, that needs to be drawn back, because in any other sort of frame of existence, kicking someone when they're on the floor would be considered absolutely socially abhorrent. Yet in this case, I am allowed to continue poking them to the point of anger. But we've gone over this.
Yeah.
What I want to talk about is there's always this when aggression is spoken about in purely sort of game terms, right? Sort of mechanically, the way games model aggression and bring out certain acts from players. They always make the Euro Ameritrash distinction,
right?
In that Ameritrash games are overt. Their aggression is worn on their sleeves and it's baked into the game, whereas Euro games are passive aggressive. Euro games do aggression through the back door. You don't actively attack someone, you just take their spot. To what degree do you think this is a myth, and to what degree do you think this is true?
I think there's some truth to it in the sense that a lot of these games do not exist in a vacuum. Games are always placed within a social circle made up by the people playing those games, made up by the expectations that people bring to the table. And because of that, aggression, the way it's dealt with, the way it's handled, the way it expresses itself, has a lot to do with the cultural and social context that game takes place in. And I think there's an argument to be made that the American school of design, the American gaming scene in the last 80s, 70s, 80s, 90s, let's go a bit back, was strongly dominated by an overt sense of friendly rivalry, where aggression, as we termed it, was visible, was understood, where we know we're going to fight each other, we're going to throw armies against each other, we're going to roll dice, whatever, the typical Ameritrash stereotype.
Does it come out of a real desire for face-to-face interaction, though?
Face-to-face interaction?
Direct interaction, because, the great criticism that comes from, especially, I think, American reviewers to a large degree, is that, this is multiplayer solitaire. There's no interaction. And if you model in, I come into your territory and then we have to have a fight, I mean, that's direct interaction. This desire that game design should be about bringing people across the table together,
right,
in a central act, because that's essentially what a combat is, right? You're bringing the two players together to do something directly together.
Yeah, but
right?
you could just as well argue that combat is always about pushing at least one person away afterwards. You could just as well argue that open conflict is also implies exclusion, because one person is going to lose and they're going to be lessened in the standing within the game, maybe even within the social group. And that's not, bringing people together.
But the physical act of combat itself is, so you do your stuff, you build your forces, and this is all very sort of separate and solitary. When it comes into combat, that's when one or more players are then actually legitimately playing the game together, because you're doing the same thing.
I think it's bigger than that. I think it's not just the combat itself. It's the fact that I'm quite certain I made this argument at some point. The idea that when you sit down to play, you are invested in what other people are doing, and that you want to know why they do it, how they do it, what they're doing, how it affects you, that you care about what goes on around you as opposed to caring only what goes on right in front of you. I think this is a fundamental difference in approach to games. I'm not saying one is better than the other, even though I might like one more most of the time than the other. Not always, but most of the time. This is what it comes down to. And yes, conflict is one way of expressing it. Once you know I'm playing a game where at certain point in time, even either predictable or, random point in time, we're going to run into each other and need to fight. It means I need to build up my army. I need to build up my offense. I need to build up my defense. I need to build up certain ways to maybe avoid conflict when I don't want it, that kind of thing. This forces you to be invested in what everybody else is doing, because if you don't, you're at a disadvantage, a strong disadvantage. Whereas other games lessen that investment into other players, into the existence of other players, into the choices and into the thought process. This, I think, is where it where these two areas, this Ameritrash concept and the Eurogame concept sort of diverge.
I mean, do you think it's about the old sort of the invention of the Eurogame idea? So basically the modern Eurogame as we conceive of it now is a German invention.
Right.
Essentially.
Right.
And so it came out of a time where Germany, because of its history, didn't want to model certain things.
So you need to be a bit more precise. I think it has a lot to do with the fact that German hobby gaming has no war game.
They didn't want to do wars, right?
Yeah.
Whereas, there was a sense of shame. There was a sense of also not wanting to address that aspect of their history directly, whereas America didn't feel encumbered.
And just general idea that pacifism is a fairly good idea.
Right. And this idea that they didn't want to do aggression in their games, that it wasn't seemly to recreate war around the table with a family. Therefore, inherently, thematically, American games are going to be more aggressive on the surface, more aggressive than a Eurogame, because fighting a war in the Pacific theater is inherently more aggressive than growing radishes, right?
Pretty much, yeah. I think the idea that you mentioned of family, I think, plays a big role as well, because a large part of German board games of the 80s and 90s were developed with an eye towards family engagement. The idea, we just recently talked about the Spiel des Jahres, which was strongly influenced by the idea of the family being the core unit that plays games together.
Well, that's interesting, isn't it?
Not the sole, just finish the thought, not the sole unit. I mean, then slowly moving away from the idea of the family being the only conceivable group that will play games together, but for a long time, this was a big influence, not the sole influence, but a big influence in how games were seen, how they were developed, how they were sold as an engagement for the family.
Well, this is the thing. I mean, I guess to use a crude delineation, the Anglo-Saxon countries, games, especially your sort of hobby games, your war games from which emerged Dungeons and Dragons and that sort of thing, was specifically designed to kind of take you away from the family. This is what you did on your own time. This is what Dad does with his mates. This is what Johnny does with his school friends, you know, whereas Germany, the focus was very much on sitting around a table with the family, engaging in this communal act, whereas in the Anglo-Saxon countries, it was about, enthusiasts, and the enthusiasts don't tend to be your wife and your kids, or your husband and your kids, or your parents, right? This is why you see prevalent a lot, because I basically only really listen to Anglo-Saxon, for want of a better term, board game commentary.
Right.
And you see a lot of laughing behind the hands and don't tell my wife I just bought these games and hopefully I can get some games as long as the wife lets me, which is, I think, very much a hangover from that old idea that I'm into something nerdy, because that gives me a day away from the family once a week, right? Yeah,
possibly. Yeah. I mean, to be fair, we're all focusing on one aspect of these developments, and I think we're both aware that all these things are multi-layered. There are many, many factors, many currents flowing into the whole idea. But I do agree that one aspect, and I think a not insignificant aspect, is the argument you just made.
And I think because it's the hobby game, the game that is not just Monopoly, the game that is not just Trivial Pursuit.
Right.
The idea of a game with design aspects and interesting decisions and depth. The point I'm making is the people who were playing them were conceived differently in the two areas.
Oh, yeah.
One was not for the family, one was specifically for the family, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay.
And so, going back to this, is this classic Euro idea of I take your spot, I take that card, is that aggression? And is that overtly aggressive?
I think it opens up this space at the gaming table to be overtly aggressive. I can think of two games only that I would classify as intentionally and purely aggressive. One of them Diplomacy, the other one Intrigue, which is the Intrigue, yeah, by Stefan Dörrer, I believe. Those two games, I believe, are completely set on the fact of creating aggression in the player, so aggressive responses and how they deal with them.
Isn't Take That inherently aggressive, though? Isn't a zero-sum game inherently aggressive?
Oh, yeah. But most Take That games, at least, are silly card card affair. I mean, they're small. I mean, Munchkin, even though it takes about 50 years to finish, is conceived as a small, quick game.
I mean, I think of Blood Bowl Team Manager.
Right.
Which is actually mechanically quite simple, but I think it's a game with some depth and some thought. But that's essentially a take that game. It's a tug of war game.
Yeah.
You're playing on either sides of a conflict,
But that's an interesting distinction you're making. I think it's a valid distinction you're making. There's aggressive and there's tug of war.
What's the difference? Is not this idea that I want to pull it towards me to make you lose inherently aggressive?
No. All right. This is going into semi-pseudo philosophical hair splitting, but I think I would draw a difference.
That's my favorite kind of hair splitting.
I would draw a difference between I pull this so I win and in comparing it to I do this so you lose.
Right.
Pulling one person down is different than trying to pull yourself up. And I think a tug of war game is all about pulling myself up and not necessarily putting you down.
That's just an unintended consequence. I think unintended might not be the correct describer.
But
right?
it's something that most in this game you're willing to accept. You can't not accept it.
Right.
You have to do this. But what you're interested in is winning and not the other person losing.
Well, this is why if we go back to Terraforming Mars, and Terraforming Mars is the great sort of furore in gaming. It's considered this wonderful thing, and people are obsessed by this. It's really very interesting. And I was playing a game of Terraforming Mars where people were intimately aware of each card, and they were showing each other's cards and gasping when it would come out of the deck, and I played it for the first time. But there are cards in there that are just seemingly wantonly aggressive. Mm-hmm. They don't benefit you. They're just to the detriment of other players.
Yes.
That seems to me to be lazy, and it seems to me to be incredibly divisive and deeply, deeply negative within the gaming sphere.
Yeah, I think a lot of people really dislike those kind of cards. I agree. I'm not sure it's so much as lazy as I think it is a shortcut to create a certain situation in a game, because I think a lot of thought goes into the kind of experience players are going to have, the kind of emotions they're going to experience within the game. I think that I don't think if in a conversation I've had with Gil Hover, designer of the networks, maybe he did mention it explicitly, but I do know that he's very invested into incentivizing players within the game designs. I do believe that Kevin Wilson argued on Twitter once, the guy who did
Arkham Horror, amongst others.
Yeah, but I would actually argue Descent, Doom, and the Civilization of the board game. And now Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, whatever the rest of the name is called. He argues that it's all about emotions, evoking certain emotions in the play and how to get there. And these purely aggressive cards are very, very, I don't want to say lazy, but a very crude way of evoking a specific emotion within the game.
Well, they're an absolute shortcut to the limbic system, right? There's nothing that's going to get your dander up quicker than a sense of injustice.
Yeah.
And if that's the emotion you want to evoke, then they do that very well.
Yeah, but the point is basically it fires up your investment, because the moment something unjust happens to you, you want revenge. And the moment you want revenge, you are motivated to beat the other player.
Well, that's interesting.
That's why I think that's a shortcut. It's a bit. I hesitate about lazy, but it is a shortcut and it's crude.
That's why I think it doesn't work.
Right.
I mean, I can only judge certain emotional reactions by my own personal experience.
Well, I don't have emotional reactions. I just need to, observe other people.
Well, that's it. I mean, I find it amazing that you just sit there.
Yeah.
And I can literally hear the binary in your brain when you're sat around a table with people.
Yeah, I watch people and just, mental notes. This is how you react when you're angry. I'll try to copy that.
I mean, psychopathy must be a wonderful... It divests you of any sort of sense of emotion. It must be wonderful.
It's a lot of work to keep up, the facade.
I mean, you don't do it very well.
I know.
So obviously you're not working very hard.
Now I'm lazy.
But yeah, it doesn't work very well for me personally, because when I see something being wanton, someone being wantonly aggressive towards me in that context, my instant reaction isn't I want to have revenge on you. My instant reaction is I no longer want to be a part of this experience.
Again,
it de-invests me with enthusiasm, because I think, well, if it's just because of that wanton act with no sense whatsoever, I'm not interested in this anymore.
That's why I didn't want to use the word lazy but crude, because it can have a lot of unintended consequences, like the one you just described. The assumption is, there's going to fire up, it's going to invest people, but just as often it's just going to turn people off the game. And that's not what you want if you're designing a game, obviously.
Okay, so you have aggression in games, aggression between players.
Right.
The playing of the cards, the doing of an act, the moving into a region. Mm-hmm. But also you have aggression on the part of the game itself. These are mostly highlighted in co-op games, right? Okay. Where the game machine is being aggressive towards the player, trying to kill the players, trying to make them lose. Mm-hmm. Right. But a lot of people say that there is, and I don't know because I've not played enough of these games, but sort of around the early 2000s, mid 2000s, especially a lot of Stefan Feld games, a lot of Euro games, the game systems in themselves were more aggressive. The games were more punishing. Yeah. If you weren't able to make the decision, you were very likely to be tanked by just the pure aggression in the game. Whereas people are saying now, modern Euro games are a lot nicer, a lot more forgiving to you as a player. You can get away, the great distinction between Agricola and Caverna, right?
Right, yeah.
Do you think games have, in that sense, game systems have become less aggressive over time and more rewarding to players? And if so, is that a good thing? And if not, why not?
I think this change did happen, and I think it mirrors a change that happened in video games as well. You had, the card games of the 80s, early 90s that were all about, punishing difficulties, like really, really forcing you to memorize a lot of patterns, recognize those patterns, like being really have like tiny reaction times, like very short reaction times to things happening. So you just keep playing and playing and playing and just keep going and playing the same game over and over again. And then there was a shift eventually when that level of frustration kept too many people from playing games. So a lot of games sort of softened in a way. They became more about guiding you into the experience, sort of taking your hand, or even, being more forgiving. I think the nicest example I can think of is the recharging health bar in some first-person shooters that eventually popped up. And instead of, running around trying to find a first aid kit to sort of pump up your health bar. As
long as you can hide, you can
you just wait out and then the health bar is full again. Another way to sort of keep you from being
de-incentivized.
De-incentivized, thank you. I don't want to use the word punishment, but, for a reason that I'm not going to get into now. I think, yes, this change did happen, and I think for similar reasons. Too many people realize, it's really putting people off to experience these constant setbacks and never getting anywhere, and seeing everybody else sort of just move past them with huge steps, and you just going yeah. Interestingly enough, I had a vaguely similar experience. Like last time we played together, we played, among other things, Medici, the card game.
Yeah.
And I had a similar experience in that game, in that I saw everybody else sort of racking up the cards, and I couldn't, because whenever I drew cards,
they were crap.
They were crap. And that sort of made me realize that there is these frustration moments where you feel I couldn't have prevented it. Or even if I could have prevented it, I didn't have the knowledge beforehand to make a better choice than the one I did.
Well, it's that great idea within social science at the moment, with the spirit level and things like this. Mm-hmm. Is people's dissatisfaction in society based upon actually what they have as possessions, or is it their perception of everyone else doing so much better than they are?
Oh yeah, it's the latter. No
well, I mean, I assume it is. Yeah.
I know it is.
And, in games, that's it. If you get punished, there's nothing more demoralizing than to see everyone sprinting around the score track and you to be miles behind galumphing like a hippo,
I mean, that's why, for example, I bring up my favorite game as well. One of my favorite games. Dungeon Quest is hilarious, even though you keep dying. Or, don't keep dying, but you just die randomly. And the only other game I remember right now that was sort of demotivating for me was Scythe, where I felt like when I didn't do the optimal choice, the game slowed to a crawl, and everybody else was going clip, clip, up, up, up. And with the 3 steps, they achieved like half of their goals.
But do you think, coming back to this, do you think this pulling back on the aggression of the game system in the Year of the Dragon is the example that's always used? Apparently it's very, very punishing. I've not played it. I will probably buy the 10th anniversary edition.
All right.
Just as an academic interest, although I don't tend to like punishing games. But do you think...
Are you sure? Really?
I don't tend to like punishing games. I like games...
That's surprising.
Well, if you look at the subtle change, games are becoming more Skinner boxy in that sense, giving you things.
Right.
Rather than having you solve things. So if you look at the subtle changes within worker placement used to be you place your guy, everyone places their guys, then you resolve the action space. That very quickly became you place your guy, you take your thing.
Right.
And that is an indication of where we're moving, I think. That... Guild, talking about incentivization, I want little bits now rather than great bits later.
Yeah.
These, what does he call them? Fieri moments or whatever. These little moments of exploding joy rather than this great sense of achievement of wading through the swamp and coming out at the other end.
I think this change is great in one sense, in that it opens up the hobby to more people, to people who aren't willing or able, or for whatever reason won't put up when they sort of dip their toes into the hobby, won't put up with a lot of frustration.
Difficulty, yeah.
Which is legitimate, I think.
This is a leisure activity, and here I am being fucking stressed out.
Yeah, exactly. You do want more games to be like, no, this can be fun. This is enjoyable. Look, you achieved something here. You achieved a little bit more there, and it didn't take 4 hours to get there.
But does it become everyone gets a prize?
And that is then the other side of the coin, in that if you lose sight of the appeal of challenge, the appeal of risk, the appeal of sticking your head out to just grab that what is it, the golden nugget, then these games become toothless. And I felt, again, I don't know why I keep bringing up this game. I think it's on my mind a lot. I don't have deeply felt emotions about the game either way. But again, I'm reminded of Scythe.
This is a criticism a lot of people have, that it's toothless.
Yeah, I think I don't feel like...
I don't agree personally, but I can see why people would say.
Yeah, but I mean, this is the idea that it punishes you by slowing down. It doesn't punish you by taking anything away, but it doesn't so much reward you as much as you wish it, or I wanted it to reward me when I took a risk. I didn't feel like taking risks. There was much of a risk to take most of the times. And when there was an opportunity to take a risk, the reward wasn't worth it. I think this is sort of the balance that I'm hoping designers will sort of keep in mind. That on the one hand, you do want to reward people for what they do. On the other hand, you also want to sort of entice them to take risks, to be bold, to be, put it on the table and go like, I'm going for the big score. And if I fail, that's fine. I can sort of reposition myself and try again later, but I'm willing to, go to the forefront as opposed to just, I'm sitting here managing my hedges, and maybe at the end I'm going to do one quick take to get one more VP than somebody else.
And that's the thing. I mean, intellectually, I think I want the game system to be punishing. I want it to be an achievement. I want to feel that I've solved a puzzle that's difficult to solve.
Right.
But at the same time, I want everything right now, Georgios. I want it sprayed into my face right now. And so it's balancing those two things.
Oh yeah. But that's just normal human behavior. And it's fun to sort of having to balance those two. It's why games that have both tactical decisions and strategic depth are so much more appealing, I think, than the ones that only focus on one or the other.
Right.
A purely tactical game is fine. It's fun.
As long as it's 10 minutes long.
Sure. But a purely strategic game is a slog. It's like it takes too long to get anything done.
Because you don't get any peaks and you don't get any troughs and you don't get any explosions of happening within a game that is pure strategy. Okay, I've got one last question just to wrap this up. And this is a bit esoteric and a bit bullshitty.
As opposed to everything else we talked about.
Well, because everything else is very grounded and very simple, and we don't use the big words, George, because we're not pretentious knobheados.
No, not at all.
Is aggression in games, whether it be above the table, whether it be the game system, whether it be, being inspired to do aggressive acts within a safe environment, is it cathartic?
No.
Expand, please.
I don't think aggression is cathartic. I think aggression is neither. Is. Aggression simply is. The context within which aggression takes place plays a huge role in how this aggression sort of affects you personally and the group in general. If you have a group where aggression can work in a limited environment, like as you mentioned, a safe space where fake outrage is sort of your outlet when you get, picked on, and everybody accepts it and laughs about it, and you can join into the laughter, that's perfect. That kind of aggression, you can't argue against it. But game situations where an aggressive act leads to emotional outbursts, which then get shot down as being childish, I think those are very, very bad. Those are very dangerous, and those are corrosive even. And
well, that's the point. I think this kind of aggression that we talk about within games, the fake outrage, the bickering over the resistance, you know, the moving into someone's territory. It's not really aggression. What it is sort of enjoyable transgression of what we assume normal social mores are. I think aggression breeds aggression. I think when you get to a point where you're legitimately angry at another person for the action that they've had, the action that they've done, that don't make you feel better after the game has stopped.
Yeah.
That makes you feel actively worse.
Yeah. I think your argument that aggression isn't really aggression, I would counter that. The great comparison, I think, is horror movies. When you sit down in a theater and you watch a horror movie, your upper brain parts know you're sitting in a safe environment. This is this comfy seat. You're munching popcorn. You're watching actors faking being killed on screen. But the emotional reactions you have the moment you watch this film, your body does not distinguish between I'm scared, I'm really scared, I'm not quite scared.
Well, that's the point, right? When I watch a horror movie, one that is scary, I'm scared.
Yeah.
That feeling of fear, even though you have a safety net and your sort of rational brain, that feeling doesn't feel any different from when I pull out into the road on my bike and nearly get hit by a car and I'm like, fuck.
Yeah.
It's that same idea.
It's the same emotion.
But the aggression, the pissing around in games, the bickering over the resistance is not the same emotion as me going, I'm going to fucking kill you if you do that again. It's not the same emotion. It's different. Right. And that's why it's not aggression for me.
Again, we go back to like I said, there's this technical dimension of aggression, technical interpretation of aggression, and then there's this murky, nebulous area where where what could be fake outrage might actually bleed into actual outrage. And this is where things get challenging and difficult, both emotionally and socially. And this is, I think, this is something that really people should put more work and thought into.
So can we agree?
No.
To finally, just to wrap it up.
Yes.
Can we agree to just call it fungression?
No, That's a stupid word, fungression.
Fungression.
Is that your name on the list? Well, get in there then. Get to the bar and get buckled. Welcome to the Guild.
Oh, Georgios.
Yes.
It's good to be back, isn't it?
Isn't it? Yeah. Actually, as part of the return package, I sort of argued with the owners, we have our own booth now.
It's beautiful.
It is. It's the only one that's pure pink.
And I just love the smell of Vaseline, menthol smoke, and dirty gin.
Have you tried maybe just washing your moustache?
Well, that's the reason I grew a moustache, Georgia, so I could retain the flavours throughout the months.
Fair enough. Yeah.
And it was great, because, after they realised that we were both dirty lefties, they chucked us out of that horrible Tory fortress.
Yes, but what you do not know, I actually put a cherry bomb in the sanitation system. So the next time one of them takes a piss, I'm going to blow up in their faces. Which is a nice metaphor for a lot of what the Tories are doing
politics.
Right now.
That's politics there, Georgios.
Yeah, it is.
Exploding cock syndrome.
Pretty much, yeah.
The Tory party is a walking exponent of the exploding cock.
Yes, exploding, definitely, and a bunch of cocks. Yes, I think we basically summed it up. But it's solved UK politics.
But it's lovely that Jörg agreed to take Janine back because they obviously sacked her because she was, associated with me, Georgios.
She might have actually helped let me in to sort of sabotage the toilets.
Maybe I shouldn't have curled one out on the bar and shouted, "You're all a bunch of fascists," as I left.
Oh, I think they knew that already. I think they just didn't like you, dropping trow and just planting a big wet one on the bar.
Had I have done it on their chests, Georgios,
they would have paid you for it.
And had I have been a 13-year-old Filipino boy, they would have been exceedingly happy, Georgios. I heard they stopped using oranges as a device for erotic asphyxiation because it doesn't tap in enough to their repellent sexual needs, Georgios. I've heard they started using the durian fruit because it stinks like a rotting fly-riddled corpse.
I'm starting to sense a certain dislike of the right wing in you. Is that correct, or am I overstating things?
I decided, Georgios, over the last couple of weeks that I'm just going to be honest with myself.
Oh, you should never do that. It always ends in tears.
I've strived for this sort of reasonableness. I've strived for this desire to sort of appeal to both sides. Say, well, maybe, although you don't agree with me, maybe, there's an element of you that is, decent. But I've decided I'm dispensing with that, Georgios. I'm going with the limbic system. I'm going with my own instincts. And, if you're a Tory, you're probably a knobhead.
I think there's no flaw in that argument at all.
And if you're a Tory that listens to this, if you vote for the Conservative Party in England and you don't think you're a knobhead or a selfish arsehole, please come on the Guild. Write, tell us, explain to us why.
Give us reasons not to dox you.
Anyway, Georgios, what was the questione in this week's Guildy Wildy?
You really don't like words, do you?
I enjoy the neologism, Georgios. I am a creator, not a bad plater.
Perpetrator? Instigator?
Denigrator.
Carbonator? Anyway, yes, the question was, are gateway games a myth, or do they really help the hobby? Brought to you by William Shatner.
The way you stress words, Georgios, is quite the most innovative thing I've ever heard.
Yes, but you don't get out much, do you?
No, I don't, because I'm so financially strained. To be honest, right, I'm wondering here, my computer's running a bit slow at the moment. I wondered if anyone there, would just like to buy me a new computer. I'd quite like an Alienware gaming computer, because I need it, Georgios, to edit this podcast. If anyone wants to put up a GoFundMe on the internet to buy me an Alienware gaming computer, then, I will, under extreme duress, accept that money. So what did Colin Gillespie say?
He believes there is such a thing as gateway games. Yeah, that's basically it. No, I think the most interesting aspect he brings up is that there's a confusion of terms between what a gateway game is and what a simple shallow game is. And it sort of ties into something I tried to bring up last time. I'm not sure if I made any sense at all. As gamers, we tend to label gateway games we tend to label games as gateway games because they're shallow, they're kind of dumb, but they're just right for people who aren't as deep into the hobby as we are. And there's something very condescending about this act.
Right.
Which I think is why I'm kind of arguing against this kind of application of the term gateway game.
Well, it's all of that thing with the gateway games is I am the keeper of the knowledge and I am the possessor of the knowledge and you don't know anything. And therefore I will parcel out this knowledge in very edible chunks because I know your feeble brain can't deal with it. And it seems a little patronising, right?
Very much so, yeah. So in that context, I think the term gateway games should be used very sparingly, not to describe games that are, for lack of a better word, dumb, in a very, very lazy kind of way. I think gateway games tend to be labeled as such because they are accessible. And yeah, there's this fuzzy line between a game being accessible and easy to grasp and a game being shallow. And again, a lot of value judgment comes in. A lot of I like deep games, therefore games that I don't quite like must be shallow. I mean, it's a kind of trap I'm sure I fall into as well often enough, but it's something maybe we should all be aware of more often. If there is a gateway game, we label something a gateway game because it is accessible and easy to play. Is it still meaty enough to keep players coming back again and again? And I think Colin also mentioned this a bit later in his very, very thorough reply. For some reason, and I hate you all for doing this because I have to read it, all the replies have been very thoughtful and long, and I don't have that much time on the toilet.
Come on, TLDR, people, TLDR. Can we have some TLDR here?
Isn't that like this? Isn't that this weird actress in a lot of movies?
She's probably in Twin Peaks. That sounds like a Twin Peaks name, TLDR, doesn't it?
The Lock Woman.
But let's speak about Jason Lees.
Let me just immediately, because I started this thought before you brought me off track. He mentions that there's a pernicious notion that these games are ludological training wheels of a sort, and for those of us who are in the hobby, the only really appeal is to bring new people in and get them past the first step into the wider world, which kind of sums up what I was.
Yeah, they shouldn't be that, should they? They should be great games on their own. They shouldn't just be, I'll give you some weak lemon squash because you're not able to deal with the full-strength lemon squash, but one day you'll be able to drink full-strength lemon squash.
What's lemon squash?
So for our American and European listeners, it's what you call cordial, we call squash. And lemon squash is very popular, or at least was.
All right.
It's nice lemon squash. Okay, so Jason Lees, MRSA Major, one of the few veterans that we have on our guild. I assume that's what that means.
Yeah.
He was a major in the army, or not a veteran, maybe a current serving troop.
You know what I think? I think it's one of these really weird jazz chords.
Ah, right, might be, yeah.
Yeah.
Does it sound like that?
I don't think I've ever heard somebody actually sing a chord.
I am quite the innovator, Georgios.
I'm still going with perpetrator.
Eliminator.
Again, I'm repeating myself. Instigator.
Castigator.
Invalidator?
Alligator. So anyway, what does the MRSA major say, Georgios?
Some folks will never really want to play anything more complex than Yahtzee. So, again, tying back into this idea of shallow games and how they overlap with gateway games, yes, there is an argument to be made, and I think it's legitimate, that a shallow game can be a shallow game because not everybody wants more than a shallow experience. And I mean it in the sense of not everyone wants a game where they are deeply invested into it emotionally or cognitively, where they just want a little breezy game, a filler, so to speak, something that passes the time but doesn't tax them overtly. That's perfectly legitimate. But again, I would argue this is different from a gateway game. A gateway game is not necessarily a game that is light or shallow, to put it negatively, but a gateway game, and I think this is a recurring theme in a lot of these responses, is a game that lets you dive into the pool that is hobby board gaming, come out the other side and go, oh, that was not bad. I think I want to try that again.
I mean, for me, what it was not diving into the pool and coming out saying that was not bad. It was me coming out, diving into the pool, swimming to the other end, getting out, and being just incredibly invigorated by the refreshingness of it. And this realization that, wow, this isn't this. Mm-hmm. This actually has the potential to be this, right? And that's... I don't know whether it's I'm an innovation junkie or whatever, but certainly when I played Pandemic, I thought, bloody hell, this is this, which was so rewarding.
And I think this, again, Isaac Shalav, who has now commented thoughtfully on almost all of our recent posts, and I hate him for it. I hate people who can think. It's so unnerving.
Especially when you're not only a fortress, which you would assume would be quite imposing and aggressive, but you're actually kind. I assume the fortress has the windows and the portcullis built into a welcoming grin. So when you walk into the fortress, you're then confronted by the sounds of music and a gentle pillow fight amongst some young ladies dressed in negligees going, come pillow fight with her, pillow fight with us.
For some reason, my nun fetish never includes male nuns. I don't know why.
I'll have none of that. What does he say?
He says, and I think he basically picks up the same idea, and it's something that pops up in the set again and again. We should be talking about gateway experiences. New players come back to a game when they discover an experience they didn't know that games could provide, and I think that's a very, very salient point. That's a very good observation. I think I agree with it. It's gateway experiences that gets people into the hobby.
Absolutely.
And an argument could be made that certain games are more likely to provide a gateway experience than others, in that it seems quite common that a lot of people do come into the hobby with certain games because they're very popular and they work well. Catan used to be one. Ticket to Ride is currently one. Pandemic might be one.
I mean, I think it's that thing, and I keep coming back to it again and again and again, but it's that thing of, this is this? That people go, wow, I thought you turned the little spinner thing, moved your car around, had a couple of babies and died. And
well, you do. And that's the big lie we put up with this podcast. Every game is like the game of life.
Indeed, but I mean, this is why I think the resistance is so. If I think about wanting to introduce non-gamers to games, friends of mine, actors who I work with, I want to introduce them to something. It's going to be something like the Resistance, because it just promotes this experience that is so. Wow, really? This is what you do? Mm-hmm. That's incredible,
Yeah, I agree. I agree completely. I think the idea that, and that's going to be a running theme later as well, the idea that games provide unique experiences is what I look for in games. Not the idea, but this is what drives me in playing games. What's this new experience? What kind of experience does this game create for my group, for me and my group? What kind of experience do I have when I play this game? And yes, there's some variation depending on who you play with, obviously. but to certain, I think at least half of the nature of the experience is based on the game itself. Certain games, no matter who you almost no matter who you play them with, are going to provide a specific type of experience. And this is how I kind of evaluate games, how I put this one experience above the other, and how I try to sort of take into account who I played it with, but also look at how the game itself helped create this experience.
And with a gateway experience, I guess what you want is the flushed cheeks and the flashing eyes and the uncontrollable grin and the sort of slight befuddlement that I've just done something that I fully didn't expect to happen and it was entirely wonderful. You know, I guess that's what you're looking for. Those moments of grand hilarity that you get from playing something like The Resistance, you know, that is sort of unique to gaming in that sort of way.
Or maybe even this experience of being challenged, like having your logical, your ability to draw conclusions challenged in maybe a great deduction game, or maybe to how you're challenged and how to be most efficient in what you do instead of just rolling the die and hoping you get what you want.
To exercise your cleverness and, more importantly, be rewarded for that cleverness is also incredibly satisfying.
And or even, you know, the idea of playing a game where you're not just sort of playing alongside each other, but can sort of poke fun at each other, sort of play a variation of very, very silly kindergarten games where you sort of where you play tag you're it, basically. Where, you know, take that games can be a great gateway experience for some people because they realize, oh, I can have this kind of nice, not necessarily rewarding, but fulfilling experience of just poking each other for fun, which you can't do as a grown-up. You can't, you know, pull somebody's pigtails without you getting a harassment lawsuit. Not that I would know.
All right, Judges, well, we have to stop now because I have to leave.
What, you voted leave?
I've just seen those two dickheads come in through the door, and I'm not speaking to them.
Oh, come on. I mean, you're obviously... It's just a question. It's just a misunderstanding.
They threw me out of the band, Georgios. Not only did they throw me out of the band, Georgios, then they mercilessly took you and your bazooki into the band. And don't pretend that it's not a thing. I know that you kept nipping off secretly, saying, "Oh, I've got to do something." And I saw when your phone rang, it said T&R practice times.
Like I said, it's Costas and the bazookies.
Well, anyway, regardless, they've just come in. I'm not speaking to them. And frankly, Georgios, I don't want to share the same airspace as them until they apologise.
Your pilots?
They maybe are. But I don't want to share the same airspace as them because I fear if there's a collision, Georgios, there'll be explosions. So,
okay.
Say goodnight, Georgios.
I'm going to call them over and see if we can, you know, write a song in your honour.
I'm Nick Mariner, and this is the Boardgame Professor. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Good to be back again on the Perfect Information Podcast. I would like to continue this week to the conversation that we were having on ethics in board games. If you'll recall, the last thing we talked about was deontology versus utilitarianism. We talked about Manhattan Project and how that game was sort of reflected a particular ethical view simply in the way the game is created. You don't really have the ethical choice to make a bomb or not. That is the game. And what I left by recommending was that when it comes to the ethics of a board game, we really are doing a version of ethics in which moral codes are predetermined. And what we're doing within the game is really irrelevant to some sort of ethical choice. And that, I think, most closely mirrors the theories of Friedrich Nietzsche. So I said that's what I was going to talk about, so let's talk about it. I've been wondering what game would be the best illustration of some of the theory that I wanted to talk about today. And the game suggestion that came to me came in the conversation on our guild. Friend of the show, Isaac Shalev, was having a conversation about ethics, started it in the guild. Thank you, Isaac. And he was responded to by Brendan Riley, who happens to be, I think, the only member of our guild who I have actually met and played a game with in person. Brendan, nice to hear from you. We met in a conference in Washington, D.C. Not a con, a conference. Those are other things where nerds get together and don't play games like a bunch of dummies. But I think he suggested, maybe Isaac did, I don't remember, I'm not going to look, to talk about the game Secret Hitler. Now, I'll be very honest, I have not played Secret Hitler. But I spent about a week looking into it, watching some videos on it, getting a pretty good grasp of the game itself. So I think I can talk about it, at least in this context here. Because the reason Secret Hitler gets brought up a lot in terms of ethics is the ethics of whether or not you should play Hitler. Whether or not a player should play the role of actual Hitler. I'll come back to that. Let's talk about the game for a second. If you never have played Secret Hitler, this is the way at least I think it's supposed to be played. Ben and Georgios reviewed that a while back in October. I think it came up as one of Georgios' favorite games of the year. I think Ben basically said, really neat design, but probably disproportionately favors liberal players. I think that's the way they said it. If I've misrepresented either of you, I don't know, call my lawyer, I guess. But Secret Hitler it's a hidden role game. It's a social deduction game. It is resistance adjacent, in which some players at the table are liberal policymakers and fewer players at the table are fascists, secretly. And one of those fascists also assumes the role of Hitler himself. The goal of the game, if the liberals can pass 6 liberal policies across in the rounds, they'll win the game. If the fascists can pass 6 fascist policies, they'll win the game. With the caveat being that if the liberals at any moment can identify and correctly assassinate Hitler, they'll win the game. And after 3 fascist policies have passed, if the fascists are then able to also get Hitler nominated chancellor, then they'll win the game. Every round there's a new president. The president picks a chancellor. The whole table votes on whether or not they agree with that pairing. And if they do, that's the president and chancellor for the round. If after 3 fascist policies have passed, Hitler is successfully elected chancellor, fascists win the game automatically. And that's basically it. That's the structure of the game. Everything else is that sort of werewolf, mafia, resistance style. Everything is information. Figure out who the bad guys are. As I said, the game comes up most often in terms of the conversation of ethics because it is questionable whether or not a game should be designed in which a player is supposed to play Hitler. And I think from now what I've seen of the game enough, especially with the sort of cartoonish art and the fact that it's not Hitler himself on the card, it's a lizard monster. It is abstracted out enough to the point where Hitler in the game is a stand-in bogeyman for despotism and evil. Hitler is just a name used to evoke that particular response as opposed to it being actual Hitler. I'm not Jewish, so I'd love to hear from our Jewish listeners if they're able to keep it at such an arm's length like I'm describing. Perhaps that's my own privilege speaking. But I think the far more interesting ethical dilemma in this game is what happens once assassination becomes unlocked as an ability in the game. The more fascist policies that are passed, the more abilities become unlocked for the president and chancellor to take advantage of in order to extend their own goals. One of which is the ability to start assassinating people. The liberals can win the game if they assassinate Hitler. If they guess correctly who it is and assassinate that person, they win the game without having to pass their own policies. And the fascists can use assassination as a tool of control. Because they all know who they are and the other people don't. So they could start assassinating people until their numbers are proportionate. And I think in the rule set, it's a must assassinate. Maybe it's a you can assassinate, I'm not sure. Because I think what's happening in the game, ethically speaking, is the suggestion that after politics have devolved to such a degree that enough fascist policies are the order of the day, even those who consider themselves on the side of justice and progressivism are going to implement questionable modes of control as a tool of statecraft. And I think evidence of this is around us. President Trump has lowered the bar of civil discourse so low. That you see, people who are supposed to be on the opposite side posting pictures of themselves holding his severed, bloodied head in effigy online and say whatever, Kathy Griffin sucks. She doesn't offend me as a lefty or as a human. She offends me as a comedian. Everyone wants her taken off of TV. I've wanted her taken off of TV for 15 years. Welcome to my level. But this is where the conversation is now. It is so base that even the people who are opponents are taking up just radically idiotic strategies, to call attention to their causes, because there is no bottom line anymore. There is no basement for how low this game can go. And I think Secret Hitler makes that statement in a very clever way. I'm not sure if that's what the guys who designed it meant to say, but I would bet for sure that it is. I don't want to put words in their mouth, but I certainly think we can draw that conclusion from the design of the game. I think it's profound in how clever it is. But those are all ethically questionable choices. Even if you're a liberal, to assassinate is an ethically questionable choice. That is state-sponsored murder without due process. So let's talk about Nietzsche. As I said last episode, or last time I was on here, we talked about the deontologist and the utilitarianism, which essentially departed from one another on the idea of when morality is created. It's either created beforehand or it's created in the moment of results. That is sort of the dividing line between those. Friedrich Nietzsche, had a critique of both kinds of morality. He critiqued most morality under a two-pronged approach. First, he questioned whether that mankind had no free will at all, therefore could not be held accountable. And second, he argued that most moral claims only stood to help the lesser classes, not the higher, those with the most potential. So let's talk about that for a minute. The idea of free will to Friedrich Nietzsche was that an organism or a thinker or a moralizer can only claim to have legitimate free will if they participated in the moment of their own creation. That creation itself, to exist itself, is the first moment of free will. And if you didn't get to make that choice, you can't ever claim to have free will. So regardless of what your theology is, whether you think you were created by a god or think you just were created out of stardust and happened, none of us ever participated in the decision to exist. And so if that is the case, then you lack free will, period. And, you can make decisions. You can think you're making choices that are of your own free will. But what Nietzsche argues isn't that you're doing that because you have free will. You're doing it because in the moment of your creation, you became a particular type of person. He was obsessed with this idea of person types. And that type that you are is going to dictate how you eventually make those moral decisions. Keep that in mind, the idea of person types, because that's important for this conversation. So he essentially suggests that if you don't have free will, then none of the decisions you make are relevant. None of the moralizing you do is relevant whatsoever. You are creating a false sense of right versus wrong because it was already figured out a long time ago what your right was going to be and what your wrong was going to be. And then he went on to suggest that all moralization, all of these categories that most people hold as ethical, are purely designed to the detriment of the higher men, the upper order, those who would be the greatest of us. The pursuit of happiness and comfort was to the detriment of those who might be the best. The creative types. He was obsessed with like the creative types. He loved Beethoven. And so if we all ascribe to these false categories that don't need to exist because they are irrelevant to existence, then those who might pursue their and transcend to their highest ability will never get there because they're wasting their time being falsely good. That is the sort of the general idea of Nietzsche's philosophy of ethics. He happened to consider himself one of these great men, believe it or not. And I should say before I move on and go back to talking about the game, I think Nietzsche is sort of a putz. He's the sort of like pathological narcissist that you run into in college who's sits in the corner at a party and wants his entire personality simply to be not being understood. I don't tend to agree with most of what Nietzsche says, and I think it's dangerous to a degree. But his ethical philosophy gets us right back to the ethics of Secret Hitler. In Secret Hitler, you are given a category, a person type. You are a liberal or you are a fascist. And that person type is going to dictate all of the decisions you make in the game. Whether you want to be duplicitous or whether or not you want to be straightforward. Whether or not you want to be honest. And within the context of the game, lying is entirely acceptable. If you lie to your friends, you lie to your spouse, you lie outside the game, you're going to have your morality called in question. If you lie within, even if you are a good person who never lies, you start lying in the context of the game, you're doing nothing wrong. You are only adhering to the code of your person type. That's true of all of these social deduction games. I think these hidden role games, lying is part of it. So if lying's not okay out of it, why is lying okay within it? And I think that's why I'm talking about Nietzsche today, because of his second categorization. His idea that you have no free will. All of your moral choices are based on the kind of person you're going to be already. Then to resist acting the way that the kind of person you are is to fail to latch on to power when it's right there in front of you. If you are a fascist in the game, there is no rule in the rule book saying that you must lie, other than it's contrary to your own survival. You are entirely capable in a game of Secret Hitler of just saying, I'm a fascist, everybody should know that, and declaring the cards you get, or whatever. But if you do that, you're denying your own route to power. That was the obsession of Nietzsche. These higher men had power at their fingertips and were squandering it on being a falsely just idol. Or a falsely just community member when they could be ascending to something much greater. And I find that fascinating in the context of Secret Hitler, but I'm also willing to go as far as to say this is the ethical guidance of just about every board game we play. That your ethical choice as an actual human thinker happens before you decide to play the game. If there's something you find questionable, whether it's playing Hitler, whether it's playing Mombasa, whether it's playing anything, Five Tribes, anything where there's a sort of ethical gray matter in the game, your moment of morality happens at the decision to play it or not. Once you've decided to play it, the morality is determined for you. You're given a role, you're given a task, you're given a set of rules. What you will decide is moral and immoral is already done. And to act against it with any other moral assumption is to deny yourself your own ability at power, or, in a board game sense, your own ability to win. That's the ethics of board games. if there's a game out there that makes you uncomfortable in concept, don't play it. The moment you start, your ethics have been decided permanently for the next hour and a half or however long it takes you to play the game. And I think Nietzsche's idea of ethics is the best summation of what we're doing in a table, especially if any game provides us any sort of moral ambiguity. And I think Secret Hitler, in particular, is the best illustration of that in terms of categorizing morality upon each player and then pitting those players into this sort of ethical quandary. I think it's a great design. I can't wait to get my hands on it. And I don't know. I'd read Nietzsche if you want. I wouldn't recommend it. It's very morose, and dense and not that interesting. And there's way better stuff out there. But he defines for us, the right, I think, compass for how to think about the morality of what we're doing at a board game, which is to say it's just a game. It's a game contained in a box. All of our right versus wrong has been decided the moment it went into print and was shipped to us. We don't exist as moral agents any more than that once the game starts. Okay, that's it. I went very long this time. But I think I'm going to stick with this notion of power, and we might dig into some Machiavelli next time. And continue to talk about the power dynamic of a game in which everyone at the table is trying to win. See if that's where this goes. I don't know. Thank you for having me. I'm Nick Mariner, on Twitter at The Good Mariner. Thanks for listening.
It's crass, unsophisticated, and emotionally manipulative.
It's this week's review.
Welcome, traveller. You've arrived at the wondrous and mystical land of
Ethnos.
chosen to struggle for dominance, and
Victory points.
you must use your wits and a little bit of luck. With the help of the dastardly,
Orcs.
honourable,
Dwarves.
awe-inspiring,
Giants.
and many more, you must spread your influence through
card play and set collection.
engage your opponents in glorious
Not applicable.
and beat them through.
Area majority scoring.
Will your plans come to fruition before?
The round ends.
And will you emerge as the new ruler of?
Ethnos. Can I go home now?
Yeah, skip to the end.
It's the one sentence review.
From seeming humbleness, this game triumphs, turning simplicity into elegance and restraint into engagement. Ethnos has area-controlled my heart.
Under a lackluster presentation, you will find an undoubtedly clever game with Ethnos, but this devotion to being clever comes at the price of its uniqueness.
Georgios? Ooh, what's that in the corner of the room?
I don't know, but it's eating peanuts with its nose.
I really found it hard to find the elephant in the room this week, Georgios.
I thought it was quite visible.
Well, I thought it was very understated, quite sort of unremarkable, just sort of in the corner, plain grey, no sparkles, no huge accoutrement, no great big saddle for a fat mum to sit on.
That is true.
The elephant in the room of this game is, it's a cool mini or not game, right?
It is. Well, that's not the elephant yet.
And we associate cool mini or not with a certain aesthetic and a certain component style, yet Ethnos seems to me to be a conscious distancing of themselves away from what they're known as. Is Ethnos plain and dull to look at?
Yes. Well, I wouldn't be quite that harsh. The illustrations by John Howe are very, very nice to look at. There's not that many of them. I think about a dozen maybe. But generally everything else screams Well, basically, it felt
Restraint.
like... I wouldn't actually use the word restraint. I think it felt like a throwback to a game I would have found on the shelves in the 1990s. It seems like a strategy game from a small publisher that, was put out in the 1998 maybe, 2001, the latest. The graphic design is fairly simple. The visuals are non-obtrusive, but they also don't really engage you visually. It's not like it doesn't sort of draw attention to itself, and it's also not particularly pleasing. It's just there. It could be worse, admittedly, but it's just, nowadays you expect more, not just from CMON, but from any modern board game that wants to sort of leave an impact. You want a bit more than what Ethnos offers.
And you can see this game, the production is scarred. It's covered in the scars from the wounds the company got from Dogs of War, right?
Quite possibly, yeah.
It's the same designer, Paolo Mori, did Dogs of War and did Ethnos. And Dogs of War is this big production where you get these beautifully carved busts, and the rules are 2 pages. Yet you have, 15 pages of story and fluff. And people saw this game and were put off by the seeming decadence and overblown nature of it. And I'm sure that's part of the reason the game didn't do as well as it should have done, because we've reviewed it on here. I don't think you like it as much as I do, but I adore Gods of War. Paolo Mori at this point is absolutely, no question, my favourite designer, I think.
Okay.
I think he's just all 3 of the games that 4, including Vasco da Gama, seem to be very innovative and interesting and fundamentally very engaging. But clearly, they've looked at Dogs of War and says, we are not going down that path again. It was expensive, and probably they lost money, whereas they've gone, Paolo Mori makes simple, engaging games. We're going to make the graphic design simple.
Yeah, personally, I think they overdid it. I think
they did. They went too far in the other direction,
yeah.
I think.
And more than just, not being wonderful to look at, I think it actually hurts the experience, because you're looking at a game that is drab. And I have to admit, when you suggested we review it, I was hesitant, partly because I felt there wasn't much to say, because a lot of people have reviewed this game. But also part of it was simply, I looked at it and was like, yeah, this looks dull. This looks like any other area majority game you can find on the shelf.
Well, this is the thing. It's interesting because this will come into the review, and it's clear. And we haven't discussed the game. We played it together the other night and we haven't discussed it. So your opinions will be completely new to me. You already know my opinion. I think we have a difference of opinion on how good the game is, or how much we enjoy the game, at least.
Yes, I'll agree with the letter, yeah.
I don't find that the way the game looks hinders my experience one iota. That'll come into the review, but I don't think it does. I was just, your initial view of it, the board isn't very big.
But that's actually helpful. I think that might be one of the better decisions they made.
But it's unobtrusive, right? Whereas Cool Mini or Not are the big dick swingers of bombasticness within board games.
But one of the reasons why those CMON games sell so well is not because they're decadent, but because there's the inherent playfulness and the appeal of getting involved in a game that is visually exciting. And this, I think, is where the presentation of the game sort of hampers how well it provides what it's supposed to do. It doesn't hinder your personal enjoyment, but I think it would enhance the enjoyment of the game considerably if it was something that, I wanted to sit down at. So I wanted to play. I wanted to sort of touch and have those pieces in front of me.
Are you talking about the initial engagement, the sort of wow factor, the desire of walking by a table and saying, that's something I want to engage with? Or do you mean throughout the whole play of the game, part of you is there thinking, yeah, I wish it was a bit sexier?
Mostly the first, but also the second. I firmly believe that a nice presentation isn't just, something that 20 minutes into the game you start ignoring. I think it's always with you. It's always something you want to look at. It's always something there's just a certain pleasure in playing a game that is nice to look at. And it's a pleasure that's not superfluous. I think it actually enhances the game because it focuses you on what you're looking at. It makes you invested in what you do. It's the difference between eating a great filet mignon out of a newspaper and maybe at a restaurant with a nice background music, nice company, the nice wine next to it, and a waiter who's not a French dick.
I think components probably mean a little less to me than they do to you, but I don't like playing prototypes as much as I like playing final produced games, right? It's just a fact. The components are an aspect. They are a contributing factor. I remember when I first got into gaming, I was playing Descent one night. Mm-hmm. And Descent is beautiful, and the tiles are gorgeous, and the minis are great, and all of this. And I remember at one point we were playing Descent, and I sort of put my face down level with the board. Yeah. And I could, from that perspective, you had the figures closer to me were bigger than the ones further away that receded into the distance. And I could imagine these people running through these halls, fearing for their lives, being pursued by these horrible entities from another world. You don't get that with plastic tokens.
Yeah, that's true.
But saying that, apart from an initial, this is weird, this is CMON, this is very understated, then the quality of the components didn't affect my experience of the game.
Yeah, fair enough. I think I can't say if it. I don't know what to compare it to. I mean, it's not like I had there was a different edition of Ethnos out there with prettier components, prettier graphics that I can compare to and go like, no, I actually prefer the prettier one. But it seems to me there's a certain dullness to the presentation. It's not, I mean, you phrase it as being understated. To me, it's just dull. I think the framing is just, there's almost no contrast. It's all very beige in a way. It's just very dull. And it's a shame because the illustrations themselves are nice. But, I mean...
I agree. I think they've gone too far in one direction, but the real saving grace for me is that out of this dullness, beauty erupts.
So, what did you think of my interactive, candid photo montage?
Well, it was certainly an experience.
So, I remember actually, a couple of months ago, seeing a tweet from CMON saying, soon Ethnos coming from Paolo Mori. I love Paolo Mori. I love Libertalia. I love Dogs of War. I like Vasco da Gama. And anytime he brings out a game, because he's not particularly prolific either. Anytime he brings out a game, I'm absolutely fascinated. Then I saw it and I went, ooh, and in the nature of Twitter, it went away.
Right, yeah.
And it was only when suddenly people started talking and, have you heard about this game Ethnos? Have you heard about this game Ethnos? And then I saw it and I went, oh, yeah, it's that Paolo Mori one. I instantly bought it because I wanted to play this game. And I haven't watched a review of this game, but I knew everyone sort of felt that it was valuable and interesting and worth talking about. And then I played it and I was initially a little disappointed. It was very simple. You do one of two things. You either draw a card, or you place a group of cards in front of you, which allows you to place a marker on the board. I thought, I don't like simplicity. I want something a bit nuttier and complicated. But as the game wore on, these beautiful decisions materialized out of these very simple, elegant mechanics, and I was blown away.
Yeah, I think what the game does very well is, well, let's focus on the experience first, because there were two moments that I thought were very, very emblematic for what I think the game is like. There are two moments of high tension in the game we've played together, and that was quite interesting to observe. One of them was very, very individualistic, if that is a word. It's very focused on individual players. And that's the moment where you sort of push your luck. You're trying to get the card you want so you can put the band together that you want to play, or you can put a marker where you want to place a marker. There's this tension as you draw a card from the deck, like, ooh, do I now get the card I need so I can combine them to play?
Which is tied in, just to fill in a little bit. You have this timing mechanic as well.
I was going to get to that, yeah.
Yeah, you have 3 ages, and basically you sort out, and in the bottom of the deck you put 3 dragon cards. Right. And once the 3rd dragon has been pulled, the age ends, and you cannot do anything else.
That's literally the next point I was going to make. The first point is basically, I'm interested in the card I want to draw, and I'm excited about drawing it. I'm sort of, I want that from the open market, or I want to draw it from the deck. That's one sort of tension in the game. The other sort of tension are the dragons you mentioned, where you don't know when the game will end. And I think this is really the key element that sort of put in stark relief what I liked and what I was disappointed in with this game, in that these dragon cards are the only moment where the group as a whole was invested into the game. These dragon cards are the only time where you care, where you have you don't have any influence on it, not much at least, but where you care what happens, where you care about what other people are doing. The rest of the turn, you're focused on your own hand, and that's I think where I think I disagree with you that the game is simple. I think it hides the simplicity very cleverly in the fact that how you combine your cards and which card you put on top and which card you don't put on top, combined with the fact that you need to discard all the cards you don't use the moment that you play a card. These are the meaty decisions, and they're hidden because they don't change what you will do, which choice you're going to take. Are you going to draw a card? Are you going to play cards? They don't change that. But there's no variation. It's still only those two options. But when you do that, when you decide to play your band, your collection of cards, and to discard the rest, this is where the meat lies. And this is a very, very internal question. It's very much, you're puzzling, you're trying to figure out, do I take this risk? Do I wait for another turn to get the card I want? Do I hope that somebody plays cards so a card that I want ends up on the market? And this is exciting and it's fun and it's engaging, but it is a very much a me experience.
You see what I really love is the way that an age, so there are 3 ages, the way an age shifts. And a lot of game designers always talk about that sort of tipping point where the game turns from one thing into another, where you stop collecting resources, you start turning them into points, right?
Right.
That's sort of, what's the word I'm looking for?
Tipping point?
Yeah, that's good enough. And I love the way each age suddenly changes character, in that you have this push and pull because it's area control. You want to go in certain regions, and certain regions yield more points than others. You have to decide, do I go in the regions where people aren't going to go, or do I go for the big points and challenge the people there? All of that's nice, but you're right. You're focusing on building your own hand, hoping the cards will come up. But as soon as that first dragon emerges, you know you're on a strict time limit then. And suddenly your gaze lifts up from your hand of cards outwards, and you're absolutely fascinated and scared and anticipatory of what people are going to do, because you either really want them to draw off the deck and end this age as soon as possible because I'm in the lead now, and if this age ends now, I look great. Or you're thinking, I just need 2 more cards. I need 2 more cards and this will be absolutely amazing. Do not draw any bloody cards off the deck, because if you draw a dragon, I'm going to knife you in the lungs. And I love the way each age shifts like that, goes from introverted to extroverted, internal to external, not caring what people do to really fundamentally caring what people do. And I found that experience always hugely entertaining, hugely tense, and hugely funny.
Yeah, I can see that. I think my experience was similar but muted in that I liked the hand management stuff. It was fine. It was fun. Fine seems like I'm dismissing it. I'm not dismissing it. It was good. It was fun. But the switch that happens into focusing on what other players do, I think that was not deep enough for me, because the only thing I cared about really was whether the people drew cards or not. And to me, that wasn't meaty enough. My decision didn't change fundamentally. It was still a question of timing.
But I love that. I love that notion of, I have it all here apart from this one minor piece that I know can come really soon, especially because when you draw cards, you have a choice. You can draw blind from the deck, or you can draw from open cards. Sometimes there are no open cards because people take them rapidly and they don't get refilled. It's only when people play a band in front of them, they discard all the cards that are not in that band, and then they become public property. There are moments...
A band being a collection of cards.
A collection of cards, yeah. And there are moments where you see that card that's in the public property section.
Right.
And you think, that's all I need. But I can only take it on my turn. I can't play.
Right.
So firstly, is it going to get round to me to let me take that card? Secondly, then, am I going to be able to play it next turn? Because if that third dragon comes out when I've got this wonderful hand that is going to make me win the game, if that dragon comes out and denies me playing it, I am going to cry my eyes out. And I love that. I love it.
Yeah, I noticed.
So what do you get if you mix together sexual frustration, hatred of the world, and congenital stomach problems?
That's basically you.
That's design.
So, you think this game is, design-wise, a lot more complex than it initially appears.
Yes.
Explain yourself.
Well, like you said earlier, there are two basic. On the surface, you only have a choice between drawing a card or playing a handful of cards. But behind this choice lie a lot of factors that you can sort of evaluate, because the cards you play have certain rules placed on them. For example, first of all, you can play as many cards as you want from your hand, provided they're either the same color or the same type. So if you play them, you just put them there, and at the end of a round, you score points for the cards you've played. And then you choose which of the cards you've played you put on top. If you've played the same type, the question is, there's no decision to be made because you only have one type. But if you've played the same color, you might have a number of different types, different races in your hand, and then each race comes with a certain special ability. And then again, you need to decide, right, which special ability I'm going to use to best maximize my position on the board, to maximize the points I'm getting. And then you also need to keep in mind that in order to place another token on a space that you want to control, where you want to score points in, you need to place as many cards as the number of tokens you want to place. So as the
X plus 1.
You call it X plus 1,
If you have tokens on the board, you need to play one more card in your band than tokens you have on the board to be able to then subsequently place another token.
Exactly. And you can choose to play less just to score the points at the end of the turn as well. So these are other decisions that come into play. And then you have, if you want to play a high level variant, if you start paying attention to the kind of cards other people draw, like the kind of colors they draw, you can sort of figure out, all right, they might want to go into that area. They're collecting red.
So you can hate draft them to some degree.
Yes, but you can also adopt your strategy and just go, all right, there's no point in going for red because I'm going to tie with somebody else, or I'm never going to reach enough tokens to tie with them. So I'm going to focus my strategy somewhere else. I'm going to move somewhere else. And these are the kinds of decisions you're making.
And it's that great complexity, right? Mm-hmm. Because it emerges as the game plays. You don't need to cram your head full of loads and loads of little fiddly rules right at the beginning. You can discover these rules as you go on. I think design-wise, the complexity is not only hidden, but revealed in a very measured, very intelligent, very deliberate manner.
I'm not sure about the revealed. I agree. I mean, it's just hidden, obviously, because the surface decision isn't the decision process you're actually making. But I'm not sure it's revealed gradually. You have, I believe, 6 different races types per game out of 10 or 12?
12.
Out of 12. So the combination of different special abilities you're going to get to use will likely differ from game to game. So I think, and I remember when you introduced the game to me, I asked about the distribution of colors within each race, and you said it doesn't matter. In the sense of like, we're introducing this game, it doesn't matter now. And this information is actually not available in the game unless you sit down and card all the cards.
Yeah.
So it's not supposed to be on your mind.
Right.
But it's the kind of sort of evaluation you would use if you're sort of really paying close attention to the strategy, to the tactical decisions within the game. If you know there are only so many red cards in the giants deck, for example, and you know one is already taken, you really want to send the giants into the red area, there's no way to do that.
Right.
You basically, it's a bad choice to try to wait for this one single card.
But the game is so breezy and it runs so quickly and it's so enjoyable that I don't think that becomes a consideration.
I disagree. I think yes, it's breezy.
Unless you want to play on a super high level, and I never kind of want to really.
I don't often want to either, but I just when we played together, I was trying to figure out like where the pressure points. What kind of information can I use to leverage my position? I think there's one clever bit is like hiding this information, making explicit like you're not supposed to bank on this information as you play. You're supposed to be surprised and sort of gamble. The other very, very clever bit in the game is that the one you alluded to before, the fact that the dragon cards come in 3s. It's not one card and the game is over. It's 3. So basically you have an announcement. The first dragon card is out. All right. The end phase is starting. You have a second card ramping up the tension going, all right, any moment now this can end. And then it's over with a third card. And again, this helps with sort of moving away from this card counting element, moving away from purely mathematics and towards something that is much more playful, much more about taking risks, much more about pushing your luck, much more about where do I move? How do I move?
It turns an area control game into a distinct push your luck game.
Right.
And push your luck, I love push your luck. I love that exhilaration it gives you, that if I can just get this done, then, and I find this happens a lot. What you do is you go, okay, I just want to do this. I just want to get this collection of cards down, then I'll be satisfied. And so you do that, and then the dragon doesn't come, and then you draw another card, and then you go, oh, but if I got this. And that simple implementation of that countdown is so invigorating.
Oh yeah, I agree. I think it's these elements sort of work well in tandem together to create these moments of rising tension and release. I mean, if you remember last episode, we talked about 13 days, and I wanted to, and I think I did mention that, and if I didn't, I'm mentioning it now. It didn't have this release moment. The release
tension,
moment, tension, then it's over. With this game, it's tension, and rising tension, falling tension, rising tension, falling tension, and then it ramps up at the end of the age, and it's over.
And the beauty is that the tension rises and falls for different players at different times.
Right, yeah.
So you're having different emotional reactions when different things are happening around the table at different times, which is really clever. But I think what Paolo Mori has done here, which is so clever, because he's reduced your actions to drawing a card or playing a group of cards, there is almost zero downtime in this game.
Interestingly enough, I think there was almost, this is sort of bleeding back into the experience bit. But one thing I noticed when we played a 5-player group.
Yeah.
It goes up to 6, I think.
It does.
And like you said earlier, the first half, you're very much focused on your hand. And the moment you lose track of the moment you're lost in thought, you don't realize it's your turn again.
Right.
And I think the speed with which this happens sort of both underlines just how little you care about what other people are doing in the first half of the age. But also I think it leads to this weird moment, and I noticed it twice and then I gave up counting, where I thought we went twice round, we skipped this guy because the player was so focused on his hands that they assumed we were still in the last round. So basically things happened even though, I mean, it was I don't want to say chaotic, but it's sort of, there's this weird speed of the game in that because you only can take one of two possible actions, and you're usually planning ahead enough to know what you're going to do in the next 2 or 3 actions. It becomes this weird experience of the first half just people sort of staring into the hand, the second half of the age staring onto the board, and then you start again.
I think it's really interesting. I think game designers are working towards this. I think Paolo Mori must have worked towards this idea of no downtime in this game. Jamie Stegmaier really works towards this. I've noticed with Euphoria and Scythe, the idea that you have little actions, lots of little actions as opposed to one sort of big monumental action that leaves everyone else watching you. Like, I think that's a real downfall with Dead of Winter, for instance, that you do everything on your turn. So your turn can take a long time. It's the same with Hansa Teutonica has that issue, where people have now started to atomize the actions, break them down into little decision points that you can make that keeps the game just clip-clopping along at a real speed. And I personally love that.
I think you, at some point you need some sort of balance between giving you room to think, or time to think, and then asking you to make another choice. And I think occasionally with this game, because of the way it's set up, like I mentioned, you sometimes don't have time to think.
Well, the thing is, when the way I play games, this is why I find this game ideal for me, and I think that's probably part of the reason that I like it so much.
Right.
Is that I very much go with my first decision. Mm-hmm. The first decision that seems plausible and interesting and rewarding to me, I go with that. And so I come to decisions about what I'm going to do on a game board very, very quickly. Mm-hmm. This might be the reason why I don't win as often as I could, because I'm not deliberative. I'm instinctive when I play.
Right.
And I love this. I love the fact that this plays exactly into my style, this idea that I do my thing, and literally the minute I've taken my finger off the board, I'm doing my next thing. I love that. The
immediate gratification of doing something.
Exactly. Living in the moment. It's just a game of moments that happen so rapidly, they become one long moment of you being engaged. And I love that.
Playing this made me want to play.
All right, then, Georgie, what did this Ethnos make you want to play?
It's going to be a game that I think most people do not compare to Ethnos. It's a game that at its core is very simple. Just compare card values. It's about placement as well, but it has a bunch of extra rules on top of it that make it crazy and wild. It's a game that has always kept me engaged all the time, even if I have nothing to do. It created moments of laughter, surprise, joy. I don't want to say resentment, but to tie back to earlier, wonderful, wonderful fake outrage. And that game is Cosmic Encounter. A game that is just as simple. I mean, really, you draw a card and you just compare numbers. And then there's a few extra rules, like you add something or maybe you multiply something. Really nothing that taxes anyone. But you are negotiating in a way. You are talking to one another. You're paying attention. You're reminding people, oh, he has this card. And you're trying to sort of cleverly use your special ability to draw somebody's favorite card from their hand. You have things changing all the time. You have alliances, and there's just so much stuff that gives me basically the rush of being engaged, being invested, and always having something to laugh about, to be excited about, and to look forward to. It's slightly less strategic, just slightly less strategic than Ethnos. I kind of love it for it. I kind of love the fact that this, for me, is a live in the moment kind of game.
And that makes perfect sense to me. That you might say Cosmic Encounter and for a millisecond go, huh? But then when you think about it, yes, they share a character. I think they share an ethos.
Ah, nice.
Of constant engagement, right? I think they do. I mean, for me, mine's much straighter, much more obvious link-wise. Mm. Ethnos is wonderful, but it isn't super heavy, super thinky. It leads me to want to play Chaos in the Old World again.
Ooh, yeah.
A game that is more demanding of you intellectually, but I think trying to achieve the same thing. Having this asymmetry with factions, even though you don't get to play all of the factions in Chaos in the Old World, there's a wonderful satisfaction in trying to deal with what you're given in the way that Ethnos gives you a hand of cards and then you deal with that.
Yeah.
And Chaos in the Old World, I think, is a meatier version of what Ethnos is.
Okay.
So, should people go out and buy Ethnos?
I think my biggest, the only reservation I have about this game, I think it's, like I said in a one sentence review, I think it's very clever. It's well done. I think it's fun, even though if I'm not particularly fond of this, focus on yourself and then occasionally focus on somebody else. I think the biggest criticism I could level at this game is that I don't think it sets itself apart enough from a lot of other area majority games out there. You could go back to something like El Grande, which is a very, very old game, a classic. Not my favorite of this genre, but I think it does. It covers similar ground, but it's a bit more not interesting. It's a bit more. The decision tree you're faced with is a bit more open. It's not hidden from you that you only realize as you play. Oh, I am supposed to pay attention to these things. It's quite obvious what you're supposed to pay attention to. It's much more cutthroat in many ways. Or you can, go one step further and buy Dominaria, which I quite like, which is swingier and crazier and much meaner. I think there's very, very, very little, comparatively little meanness in Ethnos compared to other area majority games. If you have a bunch of area majority games, I'm not entirely sure what Ethnos offers other than being clever, being sleek. But if you appreciate sleekness in design, if you appreciate cleverness in design, if this is something that invigorates you, and I totally understand if it does, and you like area majority games, I think, buy Ethnos.
Ethnos is absolutely fantastic. Ethnos is easily the best game I've played this year so far. I adore how elegant it is. I adore how seeming simplicity then promotes incredibly crunchy, meaty, complex, and enjoyable decisions. The game doesn't outstay its welcome. It comes, it entertains, and then it leaves. I've played this game 6 or 7 times since I got it last week, which is absolutely crazy. Paolo Mori, for me, distills enjoyment into all of his games, and all of his games reward me every time I play them. So I would suggest go out and buy Ethnos. It'll be the best 40 quid you've spent in a long time. Okay, I want to do something slightly different this week, Georgios.
Slightly.
I don't want to talk about how you contact us, what our email address is and all of this.
Then why am I here?
I want to talk about, we're running an appeal, a small appeal on our guild and on our Facebook page. Not sure whether you listened last week, but we did an interview with the people who run the Ugandan board game convention up in Gulu in North Uganda, and what we're doing is we're running an appeal to get them games. Now, we've put up a post on our guild and we've got a good response, and people have been generous and they've offered, and while nothing is solidified yet...
Oh, we've actually gotten one donation for postage already.
While nothing is solidified yet, we're getting people responding, but still we haven't got enough. So if you go to our Facebook page, there's a pinned post. If you go to our guild, there's a post about getting games to Africa. We want to send these people games so they can enjoy and have the access to games that we have too.
Also, quite important, before you consider this idea or reject it, do go look at the Facebook page and have a look at the video they made of the convention itself. See the actual faces of the actual people playing board games. These are young kids in an environment that's actually noticeably different from how I usually play board games, from how all of us play board games. But there's an enthusiasm for gaming there. There's an interest and excitement for gaming there. It's just something very, very odd and both reassuring, uplifting, and, disorienting about seeing games that I usually put on my table, play with my friends, and seeing them relocated into this village in Uganda. Just have a look at the video. See, maybe you see the same things I see in there, and maybe that will give you the push you need to go, right, actually do want to help. Or maybe you don't. Maybe you just don't like people having fun.
And I think if you listen to this show, you kind of think games are something other than just wasting a couple of hours. I assume you think that they have a value that is nourishing. They are something that exists within our world that benefits us. Mm. And so giving games to these kids out in Africa will be spreading the love, will be giving them the benefit too. So I just ask you, if you come to our guild, if you have any old games you want to get rid of, if you have games in shrink that you think you're never going to play, come to our guild, say you'll help, and fingers crossed we can get some games in the hands of these kids.